Welcome to the Innate Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, Loren Sofia, healer of my own fertility and health struggles, mother, functional fertility coach to thousands of women, and owner of Innate Fertility. I believe your body is innately wise, and so is your fertility. Sometimes we just need the tools to unlock it in abundance. I'm honored to guide you through each episode where we'll cover not just fertility, but how to rediscover the innate wisdom of your body, restore your connection with your physiology, bioenergetics, and metabolism, and get back in touch with Mother Nature and ancestral traditions. I cannot believe it. This week, I have the honor of talking to the one and only Dr. Carolyn Dean. She is, in my eyes, the Magnesium Queen. If you're not familiar with her work, Dr. Dean is a renowned expert in the field of magnesium and holistic health. She's even been on The View multiple times. She has had an extensive career. She's both a medical doctor and a naturopathic doctor. So she brings an incredible depth of knowledge from both the conventional and holistic sides of the spectrum to her work. She's the author of many books, including the very well-known Magnesium Miracle and her newest book, Magnesium, the Missing Link to Total Health. She's a huge advocate for the importance of magnesium in maintaining overall health and well-being, which is why I'm so excited to share our conversation with you. Today, we're covering so many things, including the truth about biohacking and what biohackers get wrong, how to tell if you're magnesium deficient, which forms of magnesium are actually absorbable versus marketing, how magnesium supports fertility, pregnancy, postpartum, nursing, and so much more for women, what you need to know about magnesium if you have detox issues or yeast overgrowth, aka candida, or estrogen dominance, how to replenish magnesium in your body, and so much more. Now, I know this episode is going to get you super excited about magnesium, and I don't blame you. It's an amazing mineral, but the mineral analyst and expert in me needs to just plead with you for a second. Before you go taking magnesium, and especially before you go taking large doses, it's definitely worth getting a hair tissue mineral analysis to see your metabolic type and what other minerals you may need before magnesium so that you don't experience a dreadful detox reaction. Now you can't say I didn't warn you. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the episode and let's get on with the show. Okay, everyone, I am super honored, and I mean that sincerely, to be talking to Dr. Carolyn Dean, the author of The Magnesium Miracle, but also she's an author of many other books that you have to read. Welcome, Dr. Carolyn Dean. It's truly, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Lauren. Please call me Carolyn.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, for the audience, if you're listening and you're not familiar with Dr. Carolyn Dean's work, Carolyn, would you mind giving everyone sort of the background of how you got into the work that you do today and what that exactly is?
It's been a long journey and a happy one for the most part. In my teens, I was very interested in nutrition and lifestyle. And my teens were going back to the 60s, 1960s, and nobody would listen to me. So then I was doing a science degree, science honors genetics. I tell people I was looking for the stupidity gene so we could cut that out. But in the midst of it all, I was in classes with, as it turns out, young people who were applying to med school. And one day, a couple of them said, "Hey, did you get your letter? Did you get accepted?" And I said, "Well, I feel pretty accepted." And they said, No. We thought you were pre-med. We just got our acceptance into medical school." And I said, they were like 19 years old. I said, "You little nerds are going to be doctors. That's crazy." And at the time I was 24. My husband, my then boyfriend, now husband of 55 years, we'd been traveling, and then I went back to school. So I marched over to the dean of medicine office I found my former guidance counselor was his assistant, Miss Elliott. And I said, why did you tell me I should be an executive secretary or a nurse? I could have been a doctor by now. So, long story short, I got into medicine the next semester. And I thought at that point in time that doctors within 10 years would be into natural medicine and diet because there was so much information out about it. But we seriously took the wrong turn, so that at this point, doctors don't know anything about nutrition or nutrients. They have no courses in that sort of direction to keep people healthy. Their preventative medicine is just doing more tests, doing mammograms and blood tests and whatever, and then putting people on drugs earlier because they feel that's the treatment. So it just got so sidetracked. And right after I got my medical degree, and then, yes, into my license, I started my naturopathic training. So I'm an MD and an ND. But in my office, in my family practice, I mainly practice as a naturopath, which is first do no harm, look for the root cause, treat people with respect. So all the things about naturopathic medicine were part of my heart and soul. And it's been very distressing to see how medicine has become just an assembly line, a factory. They give doctors practice guidelines for each disease. They give a guideline, do this first and then that and that. They don't even leave it up to the doctors anymore because everything ends with the prescription of a drug. And there's so many drugs, they're so hard to even understand what these drugs do. And when you read about the drugs, well, we don't know the mechanism, but this clinical trial showed a 20% improvement in people who took this drug. So just give it. Don't ask questions. It's come to the point where people are depending on podcasts such as yours to get some information that they can trust and then move forward trying to stay healthy and stay out of hospital.
Yeah, well, I think that's beautiful. And you're not unlike a lot of the guests that I've had on this podcast where they were going down the conventional medical route. And I myself, was initially going to go back to school to become a dietitian. And as soon as I understood that that was captured as well, I was like, okay. I was told by a dietitian to not become a dietitian. She's like, don't waste your time. You're not going to be able to help anyone. And I do think, there definitely are dietitians that help people and, they're doing great work, but it's hard to, unless, you have your own practice. And still within that, there's so many guidelines you have to meet. And so I do think that is what you said is really interesting, because I do think you make a good point that there's no critical thinking really anymore, at least. And you've seen the evolution. Even in the 60s, there was a sort of set agenda you had to follow. You didn't really have to think critically. And there's the other added layer of incentivizations by pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies where, they're incentivized if they prescribe certain things, or so it's not even just that the doctors are struggling to do their jobs, because there are really great doctors out there too, but it's just the whole system is engineered to just be this way. And it's difficult if you want to get really good care.
Well, even back then, Loren, when our clinicians in med school, this is the mid 70s, they'd say to us, give a drug for as short a time as you can. Just use it until the patient's own whatever immune system or energy or whatever comes back. We never thought of drugs to be given lifelong like they are now. Blood pressure drugs, diabetes drugs, cholesterol drugs, they're all marketed to be lifelong drugs. So the drug companies have taken over. They've taken over the funding of research. When you see nutrition research, you really have to look at the bottom line and see who funded it. because if it's against supplements, it's often a pharmaceutical company that's manipulating the statistics. So it is very difficult, and that's where we get back to when we're sort of educating our people. We ask them to take responsibility for their own health when they're working with a new diet or dietary supplement or exercise regime. Take note. What's it doing to your body? You can no longer give your health over to a practitioner, no matter if it's a medical doctor, a naturopath, a nutritionist, a dietitian. All these people have a job to do. And some of the focus on, well, maybe a lot of the focus on these jobs is to make a salary, to make money. I know doctors who got into the holistic treatment, they would depend on the sale of supplements to run their clinic, because when you're doing kind of an educational medical practice, a lot of your time is spent talking to people. You have to have staff, customer service staff to talk to people, and it's high overhead. So what is the person making in terms of the supplements, and how does that affect how they prescribe their own supplements? And I know doctors who I mean, I won't talk about the names of my products because the FDA won't let me, but I do have an online dietary supplement company with a handful of basic nutrients for the body. And we've talked to practitioners and they say, well, you only have 8 supplements. We depend on our 50 supplements in order to make our overhead. So they're not interested in those basics. So there's that aspect as well in the naturopathic world. And I was on the board of the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine for 6 years, and I saw them kind of devolve into more allopathic naturopathy. They would do research studies on a fraction of a herb instead of doing a combination of herbs, such as people have done lifelong, or ancestrally we used groups of herbs and groups of foods. We did not isolate a food or a chemical or a drug, study that alone and say, well, this is the result. And that's failing us right now because nobody is looking at the whole picture.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more. I'm a huge proponent of whole foods and whole food supplements and just looking at the bigger picture, because I really think we can miss the forest for the trees. And as I was discussing earlier before we even started recording, I think a lot of people are looking for that magic pill, and they're hoping that this one single nutrient is going to be what solves all their problems. And so, okay, I'm going to get this supplement, and this person's saying this is going to solve this isolated nutrient is going to solve my problem. So I'm going to take this isolated nutrient and then that isolated nutrient. And, at the end of the day, you might even be creating more imbalances because all of these nutrients in nature act together. And so if you are supplementing in an isolated way, you could actually be creating more imbalance, and it might provide some short-term relief maybe, but it's not solving the root of the problem typically. So you have to be really careful with what you choose to supplement.
Yeah, you see that, Loren, with the biohackers. I've been interviewed by enough biohackers to know that they'll just go, hog wild on one supplement and say, oh, it made me feel so good for, 2.6 seconds. And then the imbalance rears its ugly head. So there's the biohackers. I tell them, look, I've solved the whole biohacking problem. I've been biohacking for 50 years, and here's the answer. Basic nutrients, well absorbed, and all the rest of it. But there's the biohackers, and then there's the marketing in the supplement industry. And what's happened there, and I saw it because I used to go to all the health expo conferences, and I saw it being taken over by medicine. people who came out of the hospitals and the pharmaceutical companies, and they would come with their marketing, hoopla, and push this, oh, you have to have this herb. It does, these 20 things. And if you don't have it, you're going to die. And the marketing just got crazy. So you go to some of these big sites and see, 100 or more different supplements or different, bundles of what you needed for this, that, and the other. And I'm sure it just drives the public wild. And well, I've been through it myself as I was experimenting over the years. I would have 20 or 30 different supplements. And I've had consultations with people over the years where they've been on 100 different pills a day. And the binders and fillers alone are going to cause symptoms. And you're not really going to get that far. So, you'll go to a nutritionist and they'll either muscle test or just look at their list of, oh, you've got this symptom. Oh, take these 4 things. And then they make their 50% markup, and the patient goes home and is just swallowing all this stuff. So we got to get back to common sense. And the commercialism of the supplement industry has gotten us into a lot of problems. And then a third thing is the FDA has come down harder and harder on dietary supplements because they interfere with drug prescribing. Either people reject drugs and want to go to dietary supplements, or they're getting better on dietary supplements and they go off their drugs. And the FDA, it makes at least 50% of its income from drug companies paying the FDA to oversee their scientific research on their drugs. So there's just a terrible
conflict of interest,
bribery scheme, conflict of interest. It's just terrible. People, our people, your listeners, I'm sure they realize this. And that's why, again, we're looking to make being healthy our best revenge against this whole system. If you're healthy, you don't need drugs to stay out of hospitals, then you don't support that system.
Mm-hmm. I think that is the key. And, ironically, the less supplements you take too is also revenge. It's just hard and difficult too, though, when, you are dealing with a health issue. Where do you go? So I guess, we're definitely going to dive into magnesium because I want to talk to you about magnesium. You are the magnesium queen. But for anyone listening, they might feel a little bit, maybe this is a little bit depressing. What do you recommend how to navigate this sort of situation?
Yeah. Oh, there's definitely ways out of it. I guess I just dropped into my Death by Modern Medicine book there, where I talk about all that stuff. But most of my books are solutions. And, to sort of continue my story, what happened with me is when, I was in practice up in Toronto, family practice for 13 years, had a huge practice. People would get married to join my practice. I'll marry you if you get me an appointment with Dr. Dean. So I was going to take a sabbatical, but I was invited to go to New York to do an AIDS and chronic fatigue clinical trial using an alternative modality. So while I mean, massive stress in New York, but it was the good days. It was safe in New York. And I started to do some local TV. I was on The View a lot until they started doing drug to consumer advertising on TV. And then they didn't want me on because I'd say, well, you don't have to take this drug. You can take this vitamin or herb. So anyway, Random House asked me to write the Magnesium Miracle. And it wasn't more than a minute before I realized that I was a poster child for magnesium deficiency. Headaches, brain fog, tight shoulders, twitching eye, some mild IBS, horrible leg cramps, and heart palpitations. I was on paper a mess, but I think my adrenal glands kept me going because I was very high functioning. But when I discovered I had all these symptoms, I thought, oh my gosh, this is the answer. So when I started taking magnesium, no, I got an immediate laxative effect. So I wrote the book. I was trying to take magnesium. I was spending hours at a time in Epsom salts baths to try to absorb magnesium. And after the book was published in, I guess it was 2003, I spent 10 years trying to find a company that would make a non-laxative magnesium. Nobody was interested because magnesium is so popular, it just sells. It sells like hotcakes. So I finally found a chemist to make a non-laxative magnesium, and then I was in a corner, so I had to start my own company to market it. And what it is, it's picometer sized, which is mini, tiny. It's the size of the mineral ion channels in the cells. So these picometer sized ions of a mineral will go right into the cells. So they're fully absorbed. And the stabilized part of the mineral is sort of the proprietary aspect of it. It's an 18-step process. But we know they're stabilized. They can stay stabilized for years. We pass a laser through the liquid and it doesn't bounce off anything material. Whereas all the magnesium compounds, they're a compound which is very big and it's not going to go into cells. And all the compounds, they have to disassociate in order for that magnesium ion to be able to get into a cell. However, magnesium, more than most other minerals, is highly reactive and it binds right back up. So it may be a fraction of a millisecond when that ion is available. And that's why the absorption is so poor for most magnesiums and why you get the laxative effect with most magnesiums, because they're not absorbed and the body gets rid of them. So when someone is talking about, well, I'm taking this product that has 6 different magnesiums, that's going to be great. Well, when you look at a 500 milligram capsule of any of these magnesium compounds, you turn the label around and you see the amount of elemental magnesium is maybe 50 to 75 milligrams. Nothing. So in my world, if I'm trying to help someone who's magnesium deficient, like I was, I want magnesium. I don't want this other, 450 milligrams of something else. So there's a lot of marketing disinformation on these compounds. Magnesium L-threonine is the worst. On the front of it, it'll say 2,000 milligrams. And the label above will say magnesium L-threonate. But then the 2,000 milligrams, you think, well, I'm buying magnesium. I'm getting 2,000 milligrams of L-threonate. You turn it over, one capsule has like 75 milligrams. So in my world, when I worked on my picometer magnesium and finally was able to get it to the point of testing it, I was able to take 1,200 milligrams of magnesium, whereas before 50 milligrams would send me to the toilet. So what I see in people, I've documented about 65 different health conditions that are magnesium deficiency and misdiagnosed as diseases. And that's horrifying because what do we treat diseases with? Drugs. So then we get lists of drugs that deplete magnesium. A lot of the common drugs have fluoride bound to it to help it dive through or break through fat cell membranes to get inside the cell. So this fluoride in this drug, what happens in the gut, we all know about the microbiome, how busy the bacteria are. They break down drugs. So they'll release the fluoride, and then that fluoride, it does react with magnesium. That split second when that magnesium compound is available, boom, it'll bind to the fluoride and it makes a brittle compound, a magnesium fluoride. It's called cellate, and it binds to tendons, ligaments, and joints. What's the FDA black box warning on ciprofloxacin, which is a fluoride antibiotic? Tendon rupture. So boom, 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 you need your magnesium. How much magnesium do you need? 80% of known metabolic functions require magnesium. 80%. So that's why I'm so big on magnesium. And, I didn't find that statistic out until 2018. And actually, that was after the second, third edition of Magnesium Miracle. And that's why I just recently released Magnesium, the Missing Link to Total Health, because I had to update it. When you consider that 80% of what's going on in your body requires magnesium, that's where you begin. We'd like people to start, with 4 or 5 of our formulas because they're all synergistically balanced. But if you just start with magnesium, your immune system starts to perk up. You start sleeping better. You're not tense. Your shoulders drop. Your muscle spasms go. Your heart palpitations go. Atrial fibrillation could be a magnesium deficiency. So when you're saturated with magnesium, things improve. Maybe you're taking it for your sleep, and all of a sudden you think, "Oh my gosh, I don't need my coffee in the morning anymore. I just need my magnesium drink." And what we've also found, which is very important for women, is after 2-3 months of just taking our picometer magnesium, people start detoxifying, and women start detoxifying yeast. There'll be itchy ears, itchy eyes, maybe some vaginitis, skin rashes, coated tongue, a bit of IBS. And people will say, our customers, I was doing so well, and now the magnesium isn't working. And we say, no, congratulations. Your immune system is finally woken up, and it's going to get rid of some of this yeast overload. So it's been fascinating on this journey of being able to use something that's so remarkably absorbed and does all the good things. And I'm kind of low key about it in a way. Well, I have to be low key. The FDA came after me a couple of years ago because when we would say something about, well, take our magnesium and see if it helps your atrial fibrillation. And we weren't even that blatant, actually, Loren. It was testimonials on our websites where people said, "Oh, I took your magnesium and I got rid of my atrial fibrillation, or my heart palpitations, or my leg cramps, or my insomnia," and they would not even allow First Amendment, speak your truth in our in testimonials. So I have to stay, very low key. I cannot announce the importance of this this type of magnesium, and that's fine. Whosoever will. People find out a lot of word of mouth, because all we're able to do in our marketing is talk about lifestyle and I don't know, it's be happy, do your exercise, drink your water with some sea salt in it. It's just, and then be able to do podcasts like yours to get the word out.
Yeah. Well, if the FDA is trying to censor your testimonials, then you definitely know that you're onto something good and that actually works. I'm sorry that that's happening to you. But I would love to break down a couple of things that you mentioned just now, because I think a lot of our listeners are definitely keen on magnesium types. And so, you mentioned compounds. So when you were referring to compounds, do you mean things like magnesium citrate, magnesium orotate, magnesium, I think you mentioned threonate, there's glycinate, there's malate, there's so many types. That's what you were referring to regarding compounds, correct?
Right. And I guess since I'm a magnesium maven, I just want the magnesium for my people. The taurine may help, and yes, I actually use an amino acid of taurine and amino acid L-methionine in with my B vitamins, my food-based methylated B vitamins, because taurine is very important. But you don't need the taurine when you're trying to get just straight magnesium. It's just misinformation. The marketing is of these compounds is done by marketing people. They're not doctors. They're not clinicians. And I guess that's where, in my world, I'm so tuned into my patients and customers because I went through it. I mean, you get people who just think, oh, any magnesium is fine. I mean, look at our friend Morley Robbins. He defines his trajectory into natural medicine from reading my book, The Magnesium Miracle. He turned up at the first conference where he wanted to meet me with a silly Superman shirt on that said Magnesium Man. I mean, he just went crazy. And then how long did it take before he said, well, it's not really just magnesium, it's too much iron. And now it's all about copper. It's like, no, listen to your mentor, Morley. Using the right type of magnesium will have gotten rid of all that, the distraction that you had by not choosing the right magnesium meant that the body was still going through needing magnesium for 80% of known metabolic functions. If it didn't get enough, then those symptoms that were left over are being misidentified as other problems. So, yeah, I'll just keep maintaining that. You just get your basics in magnesium. And the other thing, the way I told you about, you take magnesium, picometer magnesium for a couple of months, your immune system boosts up. We don't start by telling people to stop everything in their world, because when the people who, even the customers who come to us, I consider they have something akin to total body meltdown. So they're already just so stressed out. If you start saying, don't do this, don't do that, they just want to sleep and relax a bit. So that's what a good magnesium saturation will help them with. And then they can have the energy to get rid of other things if and when yeast detoxing comes up. Then we work on a silver product and a natural antifungal product and probiotic. Okay, good. We've got that going. Especially with women, we're looking at thyroid and adrenals. Women who they have a profession and then they start having a family and they just get so run down, burnt out, and to the point of total body meltdown, where young women now are getting this perimenopause type of diagnosis. I don't like that diagnosis. It's not menopause, it's toxicity. What do we do for women who have had children? You really look hard at the thyroid. Most doctors realize the thyroid will get impacted by pregnancy and nursing. And all they do is blood tests, and they watch and wait until the thyroid is so punked out that they give thyroid hormone replacement. And what I found out after I worked on the magnesium, I wanted to do a multiple mineral. So I chose 12 minerals. 9 of them are minerals that are required for thyroid hormone production. 9 minerals. And myself, after about 6 weeks of doing test runs, we sent out our multiple mineral. After 6 weeks, my hands started getting warm for the first time in years, even though I'd been on Armour Thyroid, 60 milligrams. So I was able to stop the Armour Thyroid, and I'm still doing great. So it's not just iodine that the thyroid needs, and it's not just selenium and iodine. You need the boron, the copper, magnesium, of course, molybdenum, manganese. So That's nothing. You'll never hear that from any allopathic doctor, and even the naturopathic doctors don't go there. And when it's something like Hashimoto's, and people say, "Oh, you shouldn't even use iodine in Hashimoto's." Well, Hashimoto's can be a toxicity reaction, and the toxins that I focus on are from yeast overgrowth. Some of the toxins from yeast cross-react with thyroid hormone tissue and receptors. And when we can work on balancing these, because you'll never kill it all. It's part of our large intestine. But what happens with this natural yeast is you feed it with a lot of sugar, you take antibiotics and maybe cortisone, and you have stress. One or more of those things, you will overgrow your yeast in your large intestine, and it changes from kind of a budding stage to a thread-like stage that crawls up into the small intestine, pokes holes in the small intestine, and then undigested food molecules and yeast toxins will be absorbed into the bloodstream. That to me is the main reason for leaky gut. But what have we done in allopathic medicine and allopathic naturopathy? Somehow it's become SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And they don't even talk about yeast. In fact, for SIBO, they'll be prescribing antibiotics, which makes the yeast worse. So I have a whole thing on yeast education that I'm working on. I'm an adjunct professor with an online naturopathic college called Know Your Wellness. It's an accredited college. They have my modules on magnesium now, and I'm working on yeast. And actually, that's what I tell young people these days, because I'll get questions, emails saying, should I go into medicine, like you were saying, Loren, or should I go into naturopathy? And I say, do an online naturopathic course and then open a practice and use my dietary supplements, and you'll be the best doctor around.
Oh man, there's so much to unpack with what you shared. But one of the things, just a couple of questions and comments. I definitely, for anyone listening that's concerned that maybe their medication contains fluoride, with what you said too about it rupturing tendons, I have seen that actually. So I used to actually be a lot more in the sports arena. And so there was a girl at our gym who took the same exact antibiotic that you mentioned, and her tendon ruptured, and she was shocked and really, really mad once she actually read the potential side effects of the antibiotic after the tendon rupture. So just FYI, this definitely happens. Read your side effects, read the inserts of your medications, because your doctor will probably just glaze over them. And if you're worried that your medication contains fluoride, usually it'll have FLUO, FLUO in the name. So that's one really easy way to identify if your medication contains fluoride. I definitely have seen amazing things with magnesium supplementation. One of my clients, several, but one in particular that comes to mind, her family has a history of AFib, and she was already starting to experience major palpitations. She had detoxification issues. She had IBS. She definitely had histamine issues, which were likely a result of yeast overgrowth. And we were able to get rid of that with just a little bit of magnesium. Not any crazy testing either, not any crazy other supplements, just a little bit of lifestyle changes and magnesium. And the perimenopause thing too, I totally agree, which is why, in my practice too, I've helped so many women that are starting to experience super irregular cycles. Maybe it's almost gone. And then we start working together and their cycles come back and they regulate. And they're like, wow, I don't know what was happening, but apparently my fertility has returned, which is really, really cool to see. And I believe that magnesium has a huge role too, because as you said, it's involved in 80% of metabolic functions, and your fertility is not apart or separate from your entire body's health. So that's definitely something I wanted to mention. Hey, it's Loren. If you're interested in testing your magnesium status with a hair tissue mineral test, aka a hair tissue mineral analysis, to prepare for pregnancy, I'd like to invite you to join Conscious Conception, which is my pregnancy prep e-course and private student community. Not only do you get access to self-order a hair tissue mineral analysis, but you also learn how to interpret it and get the steps on exactly what you need to do based on your results. And this is just one of over 20 functional lab tests with which you get access to self-order and learn to interpret too, to support your pregnancy prep journey, but also saving you the cost of working directly with a practitioner. You lose 10% of your minerals with every pregnancy, so even if this isn't your first rodeo, Conscious Conception can help you build your nutrient stores back up to feel even better than your last pregnancy and to create even healthier generations in the future. You can learn more at innatefertility.org/get-pregnant. And if you're loving the show, don't forget to leave a review. Now back to the episode.
Yeah, let me just finish up about the drugs. If you're on any medication, just put it in Wikipedia and a drug formula will show up. And if there's an F, as in fluoride, if there's an F in the formula, it's a fluoride drug. It's really easy to find that. In terms of hormones and magnesium, I've recently read a paper where it talked about women who are on the birth control pill that has estrogen, and women who are pregnancy, their magnesium is diminished by 15 to 30%. Now that's a big range, but even to be able to say that the more estrogenic you are, then the less magnesium you have. PCOS, that's, someone has an abundance of estrogen, you're estrogen dominant. You look at all the symptoms of estrogen dominance, and if you take your magnesium, then that should help balance out that hormone. And that's pretty huge. That is very important. Pregnancy, women need to be taking their magnesium. What happens at the end of pregnancy when you're about to deliver, and if you don't have enough magnesium, you have fluid retention, your blood pressure is elevated, and you could have seizures, preeclampsia and eclampsia. What do they do in the hospital? They put up an intravenous magnesium drip. And if your blood pressure comes back after the drip, they'll put you on a blood pressure drug. They won't say, oh, you should take magnesium. It helps so much when we gave you the drip. It just boggles the mind. So magnesium has been used for hundreds of years, I think. Epsom salts have been around, and the midwives would tell women to take Epsom salts baths or foot baths. So magnesium has been time tested to be beneficial. And the reason why it's not being used is because doctors don't learn about this in medical school. And doctors will say, well, if I didn't learn it in med school, it can't be important. And then you're out of luck because you're twitching. And actually, I'll give you a big example. Jason Fung, he's a nephrologist. He's written a lot of good books lately, the obesity fix and diabetes fix, whatever. And what he says in his dialysis clinic is a lot of people are twitching and palpitating because dialysis takes out their magnesium. And he will put the magnesium back with an intravenous to help stop these magnesium deficiency side effects. And I said, because I was questioning him, I said, kidney doctors tell people, their patients not to take magnesium because it might overload the kidneys or something. And he said, yeah, I know, but I will put up a magnesium drip and it really helps. So I said, well, when are you going to write that paper? And he says, probably never, because he's stuck in the system.
Yeah, they'll go after him.
Depends on us to spread the truth.
Yeah, a couple more things. So what you said about, if doctors aren't learning this in medical school, they must think, oh, it's not important. But doctors barely get any nutritional training, if any at all. And it's maybe 2 hours, maybe not even any, maybe it's slightly more, but when it comes to nutritional training, they're trained to, and again, it's training, not even education or a knowing. It's just training. Do this, 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 and this. A process they're learning, not critical thinking. So, and I don't mean to just completely throw them under the bus, but that is what they're taught, the Merck manual. So, why learn nutrition if you can prescribe a supplement? Just putting that out there. What you said about estrogen dominance. So what I've found, maybe a triad here, is magnesium deficiency, estrogen dominance, and yeast overgrowth. I find that yeast overgrowth is really, really common with women with estrogen dominance as well. Yeast seem to just really proliferate in an estrogen dominant environment, which of course can mean a magnesium deficient environment as well. And one more thing about pregnancy, my mother had preeclampsia with me and my youngest brother. So it's something that I've studied and helped a lot of women with. My youngest brother was born 2 months early because, they were so bad. It was so bad that the doctor was like, we have to give you an emergency C-section right now, or one of you is not going to make it, which is really scary. And I asked her about this, I was like, well, what did they give you, and just it's medications. That's it. Nothing about magnesium, which is so important for blood pressure regulation, which is one of the biggest, it's one of the pillars of preeclampsia is high blood pressure. And magnesium is, I think it might be the most prevalent mineral in amniotic fluid, which just goes to show how important it is for baby as well. So magnesium is really, really important. And it's something that I personally supplemented during my pregnancy with my son. But the question that I wanted to get to is, okay, we were talking about this earlier, isolated supplementation of nutrients. Now, somebody listening might be saying, they just talked about how important it is to not isolate nutrients and supplement them. Now, how can we, I would like to discuss this with you because I think it's important to just acknowledge that and then also discuss this amongst our whole conversation.
I know I joke about that myself, but I guess it's setting the stage so that you start with that as your groundwork. If it's effective in 80% of known metabolic functions, we have to know that. So we have to be able to use it. And for me, like clinically and with my customers, it made it easier for people to just be able to, okay, I'll just start with this one thing and I'll feel better. And then I'll know what else is left over. But in our marketing with our customers, we'll say, then there's the multiple mineral to support your thyroid and your adrenals. And then there's the B vitamins that are whole food based or methylated. We've got this whole MTHFR abnormality gene variation. It's not a genetic defect, it's a variation. And it depends on certain metabolic functions in the body working properly. Magnesium has something to do with it, for Pete's sakes. But I jump that and work with food-based methylated bees, because if you look at studies with synthetic bees, they really don't work that well. What's happened with the synthetic supplements is there's a rotational spin on molecules. There's right-handed and left-handed. And one is a natural rotation and one is the synthetic rotation. So if your receptor site needs to have this conformation and you give it this conformation, it's not going to go in. And with the synthetics, I saw this through my practice. I began my practice in 1979, and it was just the beginning of getting naturopathic colleges, getting conventions, and alternative medicine doctors talking, and the supplement industry. The supplement industry back then was using food-based supplements. They were. It was all food-based. And then the drug companies, I guess, got involved and said, well, we can make this synthetically and much cheaper. And that's where I started to see, the synthetic doesn't really work that well orally for really sick people. Let's give it intramuscularly, or let's give it intravenously, and let's give it in higher doses. And instead of where the body might just need a milligram or two of a B vitamin, what are people swallowing? 50 milligram doses or 100 milligram doses instead of 2 and 3 milligrams. So they're really forcing the synthetics. Then there's vitamin C. We have to use food-based vitamin C, but there's also ascorbic acid. And I used to just be pro food-based, and then I started interviewing the doctors who are using intravenous ascorbic acid because you can't shoot a food into the veins. And they have miraculous healings with ascorbic acid. And then they'll show you studies where, yes, in animal studies, we see how vitamin C is made, and they are making ascorbic acid. So I'm working with both. And then you look at the omega-3s, how important they are, and how there's too much more omega-6s in our diet compared to omega-3s. So people have this omega-6 from vegetable seed oils that is pro-inflammatory. You need a certain amount of omega-6s, but we've got way too much because it's cheap and it's in everything. I went through a period when I got kind of addicted to an organic snack, and I'm always looking to see if I'm inflamed. And the inflammatory marker is if you put your fingers down like this, and if they're nice and tight and they don't hurt, that means you have not got fluid retention or swelling or inflammation. If they don't press down properly, you're inflamed. So my fingers started being like little sausages, and I finally read the label on my snack, and it was sunflower oil. So I was ingesting this omega-6 fatty acid and throwing myself into an inflammatory state. So I work with omega-3, but I don't like to work with a fish oil, because what's happened with fish oils these days, they have to be heavily processed to get rid of the toxins and the heavy metals. They really do. Apparently, there's some plant in Sweden or whatever where all the fish oils go for this massive processing. And what's left behind from that processing could be chemicals and ingredients that we really shouldn't have. And also, when you look at something like krill oil as an omega-3, krill is the food of whales. I live in Maui. I see whales out my window. And if the krill is going to be farmed to make supplements for humans, the whales aren't going to have any food left, because humans are well known for overfishing, over harvesting. So those are the nutrients I look at, and D3K2. The K2 part helps direct calcium into bones and teeth, and D3 is the natural form, whereas D2 is the synthetic. So those are the basics that I work with.
Yeah, and magnesium is so important for that calcium regulation too itself. So one comment on the fish oil, I've heard, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Catherine Shanahan's work. I think she's in Hawaii too, by the way. Maybe not where you are, but I'm not sure. where exactly. But she's referred to put fish oil as like trying to put lightning in a bottle because it's just it's so delicate. The fats are just so delicate and vulnerable to oxidative stress, light, heat, and air. And then, the whole processing and sourcing of it all, too, is really problematic. There's also a lot of heavy metals and dioxins, depending on how they're raised. It's a mess. So, I'm glad you're giving the whales some food because I know that we've done some pretty big damage to our oceans as well, which you probably see way more of than out here in Colorado where I am. But yeah.
Every body of water that's been tested for heavy metals and toxins and pharmaceutical drugs has found a quantity of one or more of those things. You find birth control pill residue in water up in some mountain stream. So every body of water in the world that's been tested has found toxicity. So, I've gotten to the point where you can't tell people they can avoid any of this anymore. I remember years ago, in 2005, I wrote Death by Modern Medicine, and I talked about the 50,000 chemicals that are in our environment and they weren't tested. Well, I just did a search the other day, and they said there's like hundreds of thousands of chemicals that we've created that pollute our environment. And it used to be, I remember in the 80s in my practice, I'd have a few people who were already in total body meltdown, and that got into chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia. And they were trying to avoid the world. And that's where I got into I don't tell people to avoid because it becomes so isolating. We have customers who've tried to live in the wilderness to get away from all the even the Wi-Fi. With EMFs, electromagnetic frequencies, they affect the calcium channel ions. The wavelength, the electromagnetic wavelengths open up calcium channels so that too much calcium gets into a cell and causes hyperexcitability until the cell dies. Well, what keeps the calcium channels closed is magnesium. So right there with Wi-Fi and all the rest of it, and instead of trying to isolate yourself, although you should turn off your cell phone at night and try to live in a room that doesn't have a TV and all that sort of radiation. But if you want to protect yourself against all the waves, you can only imagine everyone that has an iPhone, and they're all picking up signals, and they're all going through our heads. So we protect ourselves not by hiding in a cave, but by taking magnesium and also vitamin C. The Japanese are doing studies on vitamin C and how that protects against Wi-Fi radiation. Then we've got nuclear radiation. What protects you against that actually is turmeric. I'm working on an organic turmeric for my people because I believe in nuclear power. I think it's the cleanest there is, but there's going to be the residue and some fallout that occurs. So we have to protect ourselves. So there's many layers of things that we can do, but we just have to stay positive. Seriously, when I discovered my magnesium deficiency in New York, so that was in the mid 90s, the early 90s. So that's going back 35 years ago. And at that time, I was in my late 40s. I'm now 75, and I feel better than I did back in my late 40s. I feel like I'm in my 30s. But I kind of missed my 30s and 40s by being so magnesium deficient. I just had to keep myself revved up to get everything done in my world. And I thought it was normal. And that's what so many people go through. I mean, look what you went through. You've on your podcast, you talk about sort of being stuck in the veganism, vegetarian world and feeling symptomatic. And then you took a birth control pill and that affected your hormones. And we're all doing these things to ourselves, being on the wrong diet, taking medication. I took the birth control pill for 10 years and really grew my yeast. I had mercury fillings. I had to get rid of them. And overcoming all these things, you get higher and higher levels of wellness. But in my case, and I think in the case of many people, until you get your magnesium saturation and then you work on your other nutrients, I don't recommend iron because we do have a system in our body where we hold on to our iron, and some people have iron overload. But if we use bioavailable copper, which I have in my multiple mineral, I have a bioavailable picometer copper, and your copper helps create your ceruloplasmin protein that holds onto your iron and keeps it from being a problem. So everything can be taken care of with the nutrients that we know we should have. I think the only thing I haven't talked about, Loren, is putting sea salt in your drinking water. Sea salt has 72 or more trace minerals. And minerals are what helps make our metabolism work inside our cells. Minerals inside the cells pull in water. If you don't have enough minerals, then you're getting fluid retention, people with ankle swelling. That's a lack of minerals. It's not too much water. And we hear people who have high blood pressure and maybe ankle edema, they're told, don't drink any more water. Dehydrate yourself to get rid of your symptoms. It's crazy. So you need your minerals. So what I recommend is you take your body weight in pounds, cut that number in half, and drink that many ounces of water every day. And in each liter or so of water, put a quarter teaspoon of a good sea salt. A good sea salt is one that has some color to it, pink or gray or whatever. If it's white sea salt, it's been processed and the minerals have been removed. And you drink that water through the day, maybe drink most of it in the early hours, in the morning and early afternoon, so you won't be up at night. But it's amazing how people's fluid balances out when they drink enough water with minerals.
I love that. Thank you for all those practical tips. I think, that's something that you could start doing today. And I think Morley has this saying, don't drink hungry water. I think that's exactly what Carolyn is saying is, remineralize our water, because even if it is from the tap, it's been processed and it's also got probably some chlorine in it and some fluoride in it. And so, a good water filter is great, but that can also take more out too. So, remineralize wherever you can. And I think that just starting with a quarter teaspoon of sea salt, like you mentioned, is totally doable. And so I love that recommendation. Thank you.
Well, Loren, let me say, start with a pinch. Yeah, start with a pinch. If you start with a quarter, it may, it'll taste different because you're not used to it. But just put in a pinch and then increase. And you'll find, I find sea salted water now kind of sweet. And if I happen to drink a plain water, it's just so dull like dishwater. And like you say, it's all filtered. Everything is removed. Water now, for the most part, is dead. It's dead because of all the filtration. Bottled water, if you look at the fine print at the back, at the bottom, it'll probably say distilled or reverse osmosis, where nothing is left. And we're supposed to get our minerals from our food and our water. And you mentioned about, food in the beginning. I think we've missed the boat on food being our medicine anymore. I support organic biodynamic farm here in Maui because I'm very committed to good food. But even when I just have done experiments trying to live off just the farm food and our chicken eggs, I get all my magnesium deficiency symptoms back. The farmers aren't able to replace all the minerals that we need in our diet. And that's again why I was kind of forced to go into the dietary supplement business, because people kept saying to me, well, you're telling me all these things, but I don't know where to get the right food or the right dietary supplements or whatever. And actually, that happened around 2008 when we had a big economic crash. And people said, I'm too busy now to read all the information you're putting out. Just tell me what to take. So for that reason, and because I needed the magnesium for my own health, I just got into the whole aspect of, okay, what can I provide people that they're not getting in their food anymore, that they really need and may need extra because of the stress. There's studies out that show that people who are under stress are very depleted in magnesium. We talked about high estrogen, depleted in magnesium. Taking most drugs, depletion of magnesium. You have surgeries where people will come out with heart palpitations. Why is that? Most of the inhaled anesthetics are fluoride drugs. One of them has like 6 fluoride molecules in 6 fluoride atoms in each molecule. So you come out of surgery magnesium depleted and heart palpitating. You're put on drugs. Flecainide is one of the big atrial fibrillation drugs. It's loaded with fluoride. So we have a lot to overcome. And then, we'll get people who'll say, well, if I try to take enough magnesium, I get the laxative effect. And that's why what we've tried to overcome with our picometer magnesium. It's a liquid. You put it in your sea salted water, and you sip that through the day. Maybe you also have another glass of just sea salted water, but you spread it out through the day. If you took all your magnesium of any type all at once, you could get the laxative effect. So when people ask me, well, what type of magnesium I should take, look for liquids or powders that you put in water and sip through the day. Of course, if you want one that's 100% absorbed at the cellular level, you'll look at my magnesium. But I will tell you, any magnesium, any amount of magnesium will be beneficial to people because it's so required. 80% of the metabolic functions require magnesium. So in your cupboard, if you have a little bottle of magnesium, start taking it. And the sea salt, start drinking water with sea salt. And also start moving. You just got to keep moving. And, if you have an injury, I had a really bad injury recently, fell on my knee and my elbow, just slammed them on a concrete floor. And I was, even at the moment when I was just in terrific pain and going into shock, I said, well, at least I didn't break anything.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to look at. If we have to stay strong and resilient so that we don't get sick and break things and have to go to the hospital and all the rest of it. And then you work your body so that you get your range of function and get it back. Never quit. Do not move into a 1-story house because the stairs are giving your knees a problem. Look at why your knees are a problem. Maybe you do need a little more calcium. I don't work a lot with calcium because I think we have enough in most diets, but I do have a picometer calcium if people aren't getting dairy products, green leafies, grains, and nuts and seeds. And maybe I'll just jump into diet for a second, Loren, because what's happened now with the focus on the ketogenic diet, which I definitely went into it for a couple of years, but I've smoothed it out to taking more carbohydrates. But the ketogenic diet kept us away from so much carbs, fruits, and vegetables that we were missing our vitamins and minerals. And again, what I say about a ketogenic diet or even fasting or intermittent fasting, keep taking your supplements, your picometer minerals and your food-based vitamins, because that's what the body's looking for in food. If we can't get it in food, we have to take it in our dietary supplements.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a good point too, just looking at what you're eating in general and looking at possibly the gaps that are within that. I think the more that you remove food groups and restrict foods, the more opportunity you're going to have for possibly nutrient deficiencies. And, the food system isn't perfect, as you mentioned. Even you could have the most organic, pure, ethically sourced, sustainable, blah, blah, but regenerative, which is great. I think, what you invest in, you vote for as well. And there's nothing more worthy of investing in and voting for than, food and your health. But again, I think you put it so well before, nothing's perfect. So look at the reality and make changes that are realistic. You're not going to be able to have the most perfect, pure food, but that doesn't mean you have to hide away and grow your own food if that's not realistic for you either. So I think there was a lot of really practical suggestions in this conversation, because I know that a lot of people think like, oh, I have to move to the wilderness and, live away from community and grow my own food and raise my own cattle. And that's beautiful. I love that. And that works for a lot of people, but for the most of the population, that's just not realistic. And so what can you do in your life to enrich it in a way that's going to promote health and wellness? And you can still achieve that, even if you're not doing what I just mentioned.
I think with diet, the way I start out is telling people kind of what to avoid. If you want longevity, you avoid sugar because sugar causes a lot of problems, glycating proteins and antidoting vitamin C. Sugar, glucose sugar, and vitamin C are almost identical structurally, so they fight to get into cells. And if you're overloaded with sugar, it pushes out vitamin C, so your cells don't have the proper antioxidants. So avoid sugar, avoid calcium, taking calcium supplements, try to get it in your diet. They say aging has to do with calcification. What helps balance out calcium is magnesium. And then there's in the genes, the telomeres at the end of chromosomes. When they get old, they fray like the end of a shoelace, and magnesium stops the fraying of telomeres. So look at sugar, calcium, and magnesium, of course. And as I mentioned, I think the seed oils are a big factor in aging as well. So there are things you can gently avoid and replace with more natural things. It's hard with sugar. I mean, I know I'm kind of I love sugar. I avoided sugar for like 10 years when I was trying to work on my yeast overgrowth. And it really wasn't until I worked on, and I briefly mentioned, I work with picometer silver and a gentle antifungal called Saccharomyces boulardii and humic fulvic for pre and probiotics. And that, when I'm taking it daily, I recommend it daily, and that keeps me from having yeast overgrowth, but still able to eat my fruit or my desserts here and there and not feel deprived. I mean, I think we're living at a time where we all feel so deprived. I mean, what we went through with the crazy shutdown and everything, it put everybody into kind of PTSD, and we can't keep depriving ourselves. So with diet, yes, organic as much as you can, and try to eat a lot of the food groups. I don't really think veganism or vegetarianism is healthy for everybody. Loren, only 4% of the population in North America is vegan or vegetarian. 4%. Yet they'd make you think that everybody should be following those diets because they're the healthiest. And if they were the healthiest and people felt the best on it, more people would be doing them. So there's a lot of marketing with the vegan vegetarianism.
Yes, 100%. And that plays into a lot of the environmental initiatives that are going on, which a lot of it is misconstrued. So that's a whole other conversation. But I would love to ask you two more questions. One is, I like to ask this of all our guests. You already gave so many practical tips, but if there was one thing that the audience could start doing today to support the innate wisdom of their body, what would that be?
So I've said a few things, as you said. I'd say start smiling more. When I do my morning walk, which I'm blessed to be able to do on the boardwalk on the ocean here, I smile at everybody. And for the most part, they smile back. So I'm collecting smiles. I'm elevating myself and I'm elevating other people. It's just amazing what that can do. So just giving yourself out and you'll bring it back to you. So collect smiles.
I love that. That's so important. I think energy exchange is there's something really to that. Thank you so much for being here and sharing so much of your time and wisdom. My last question is, how can people find you and support you?
Okay, my product site is rnareset.com, rnareset.com, and my educational site with my blogs and webinars and radio show. I have a Monday live radio show. That's just drcarolyndean.com, Carolyn. So come and visit anytime.
Amazing. I'll make sure to include links to all that stuff in the show notes. But yeah, Carolyn, thank you so much for being here again. It was such a pleasure talking to you. A super, super big honor. And I can't wait to maybe have another conversation with you in the future. Thank you so much for listening to the Innate Wisdom Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review and share the podcast with someone who you think might benefit. If you're new here, we can't recommend enough that you take advantage of my free resources, like the Get Pregnant Yesterday checklist, Cycle Literacy Guide, Prenatal Primer, and Sperm Booster Manual. And if you're trying to conceive now or in the near future, I invite you to join my Pregnancy Prep e-course, Conscious Inception. Make sure to follow me on Instagram too, at innate_fertility, and consider joining my newsletter to receive exclusive content related to fertility and so much more. A friendly reminder, the content shared on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be a substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professional. It is not intended to be, nor does it constitute healthcare or medical advice.